You know, if you go stand in Tiananmen Square today, his face is still there, just watching. Decades after he died, the portrait of Mao Zedong still hangs right over the heart of China. It's this constant presence. He was called a liberator and a monster, a genius and a criminal. And trying to understand that contradiction, well, that's the key to understanding the world that he built.
His name was Mao Zedong. And here's the thing, whether you realize it or not, the global power dynamics we see in the 21st century, the entire operating system of modern China, he drew up the blueprints for it.
And this quote from someone who knew him really well, his own secretary, it just perfectly nails the paradox we're going to dig into. How could one person possibly be both of those things? To figure that out, we have to go way back, right back to the very beginning.
So our story starts in a place that couldn't be farther from the centers of power. We're talking about a tiny village called Shashan, a world of mud paths and rice paddies.
Mao was born in 1893. His dad was a peasant who had clawed his way up to become a pretty successful farmer. And his father? Well, he just saw another farmhand. But the kid was different. He couldn't get enough of these historical novels about rebels and heroes. So, at just 16 years old, he does the unthinkable. He defies his dad, walks out on an arranged marriage, and just leaves the farm to go find an education.
What's so fascinating is what he read first. See, before he ever even discovered Marx, he was educating himself in this little provincial library, just soaking up the foundational text of Western liberalism. We're talking Adam Smith, Montesquieu, Darwin, Rousseau. He was literally building his own worldview piece by piece. Eventually, his journey takes him to the capital, to Beijing. But he doesn't get there as some elite student. Nope. He's a librarian's assistant. He's the guy shelving the books, stamping the cards, basically a background character, listening in from the margins as all of China's greatest minds are debating the country's future. And it was right there, in the corner of the room, that he was finally introduced to Marxism.
And that introduction, it sparked an idea. But, and this is the crucial part, it wasn't the idea that everybody else had. Mao was about to break the single biggest rule of communist revolution.
Okay, so here's the deal. Traditional Marxism, the doctrine coming straight out of Moscow, it said that revolution could only come from the industrial workers, the proletariat in the cities. But Mao looked at China and he saw a totally different picture. China didn't really have massive factories. What it had was 400 million peasants. And his big revolutionary idea was that this huge, overlooked population out in the countryside, that was the real engine for change. Now, this unorthodox idea put him at odds with pretty much everybody. His rivals, Moscow, you name it. By 1934, his communist forces are surrounded by the nationalists, and they are on the verge of being completely wiped out. So what does he do? His solution just defied all military logic. He marched away. It was an epic 6,000-mile retreat across some of the most brutal terrain you can imagine.
They started that march with 80,000 soldiers. 80,000 men and women who believed in the cause, setting out on this absolutely desperate gamble just to survive.
And after a solid year of constant fighting, starvation, and freezing cold, only 8,000 were left. By any standard, it was a catastrophic loss.
And yet, this is where you see Mao, the mythmaker, in action. He somehow managed to transform this devastating military defeat into a powerful legend of survival, of pure resilience. The people who survived were forged into this unbreakable, fanatical core, and the story of their march, it spread like wildfire through the countryside, making Mao the absolute, undisputed soul of the revolution.
All right, so after years of war, Mao finally stands victorious in 1949. But conquering China? That wasn't the end of his ambition. No, it was just the beginning of this incredible geopolitical gambit. With those 5 words, he declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. He was announcing to the entire world that the century of foreign humiliation was officially over. And right here, you see his strategic genius at work. The world was dividing into 2 camps, right? American and Soviet. Everyone was expected to pick a side. But Mao, he refused. He actually engineered this dramatic split with the Soviet Union, kicking out all of their advisors in 1960. He then positioned China not as a follower of either side, but as the leader of a third pole, the developing nations of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. He was building his very own power base on a global scale. But that dream of building a new world, of rapidly turning China into a global power, well, it would come at a price. An absolutely unthinkable price. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn. The plan was called the Great Leap Forward. And the dream was to industrialize China practically overnight. The dream was to surpass the West. The reality was a complete nightmare. Farmers were pulled from the fields and ordered to make steel in backyard furnaces, melting down their own tools to do it. The harvest rotted, and local officials, terrified of looking bad, they reported fake, inflated grain numbers to Beijing. So China was exporting food for prestige while its own people began to starve. The famine that resulted from this killed an estimated 15 to 55 million people. Let that sink in. It is still the largest man-made famine in all of human history.
His own personal secretary, Li Ri, gave this chilling assessment. And this right here is the unbearable contradiction. The man who rose to power supposedly to liberate the Chinese peasant ended up killing more of them than any invader, any emperor, any catastrophe in their thousands of years of history.
And the horror didn't stop there. In 1966, when he sensed his power was slipping, he unleashed the Cultural Revolution. He basically turned the country's youth into a weapon to go after his enemies and destroyed China's past. And yet, and this is just mind-blowing, even as his country was burning, the strategist was still at work. In 1972, at the absolute height of all this chaos, he welcomes U.S. President Richard Nixon to Beijing, a stunning move designed to counter the Soviet threat.
Mao died in 1976. In the years after, his successors, they dismantled his radical economic policies, but they kept something else. They kept his political blueprint. And this is why Mao still matters so profoundly today. The economic system, yeah, that changed. But the political architecture, that remains the core operating system of China right now. The state control of all media, the absolute power of the one-party system, the surveillance, the information control. That is all Mao's enduring legacy. One of his own comrades, a guy named Chen Yun, perhaps said it best. It's really this tragic arc, isn't it? A liberator who becomes a destroyer. A great man whose final decade was just defined by this epic, unforgivable failure.
He transformed China. He took it from a broken semi-colony and made it a major world power. He also built a political cage around its people that is still standing today. The Red Prince is gone, but his blueprint, his architecture of power, that remains. And it all leads to this final question. Are we all, in some way, still living inside the world he built?